Once upon a time, there's a baker named Weizbach, picks up a cool instrument he found, and then played a few notes with it and was like, "So, this is how music sounds like, huh? Neat." And then gave birth to many offsprings, who many of them also picked up an instrument they found, and then played a few notes with them and were like, "So, this is how music sounds like, huh? Neat." And so the Bach family was born in Thuringia, Germany. With so many professional musicians in the family that the word Bach even became synonym for musician in their hometown. This guy from Bach family by the name of Johann Ambrosius Bach and his wife Maria Elisabeth Lemmerhirt gave birth to many children, hoping the word Bach will remain as the icon of music in their hometown for decades. Beyond their expectation, however, the eighth and the last child would become the icon of music in the whole world for centuries. His name is Johann Sebastian Bach. So Johann Sebastian Bach was born in a music family, and you can probably imagine his daily life. Every morning, he ate violins for breakfast, smoked pipe, organ when he was free, and before bed, his father read him bedtime music theory. That's the everyday life of little Bach. And he loved it. Bach became very passionate in music, mastered all the instruments he was taught, and he had an uncommonly fine triple voice as described, that he became one of the singers in the church choir singing motets.
"This is awesome,"
He thought to himself.
"Wish I can live like this forever."
Unfortunately for him, his happy childhood was soon cut short by the death of his mother.
No! I guess I'll have to live with my
And
father.
the death of his father 9 months later. Bach now had no choice but to live with his elder brother. Death had taken away Bach's parents and his happy childhood. But what nobody could ever take away from him is his passion for music. His elder brother now became his new music teacher, and Bach was a very diligent student, perhaps a little bit too diligent. He not only copied a ton of musical manuscripts his brother assigned him, but also wanted to copy his brother's private musical manuscripts. By doing so, he even sneaked into his brother's study room and copied the manuscripts at midnight. Bach's family's financial circumstances had not been so good since his parents passed away. Then his elder brother gave birth to a baby and could no longer afford to raise Bach. So Bach, who was just 15, had no choice but to earn money on his own. Luckily, Bach had a very strong pair of legs. He traveled 180 miles all the way on foot to his new work and study place, Lüneburg, where, with his beautiful voice, could work in the choir. Everyone, please welcome our new singer of our choir, Mr. Bach. He has the best soprano voice we could ever have. Mr. Bach, show them. Yeah, unfortunately, Bach soon had his voice change. But thankfully, he still had his skill in violin and harpsichord, so he then continued to work as an instrumentalist. During the time in Lüneburg, Bach met a pretty cool teacher by the name of Georg Boon, who just so happens to be an old friend of Bach family. He taught Bach quite a few things, including Hamburg organ traditions and French instrumental music. Bach also had the chance to learn about German church music in a fine library. And now seems like a good time to talk about this guy, Martin Luther. Here are some fun facts about Bach and Martin Luther. Although not living in the same time period, have some interesting connections. Bach himself was a Lutheran. The town Bach was born in was the place where Martin Luther translated the New Testament into German. And the school Bach went to as a child happened to be Martin Luther's alma mater. Therefore, Bach studied a lot about Lutheran music since his early age, which would become a huge inspiration for his later works. After Lüneburg, Bach then worked in Weimar, but for only about 7 months, saying, "Meh, that doesn't seem like a place where I can create some of my masterpieces," and started my first period. So he then works as an organist and the trainer of church choir in Arnstadt. Now that Bach finally had a fine job with fine salary, he thought, now seems like a good time to get into trouble. While training the church choir, he got so dissatisfied with the bad performance that he called a bassoonist a weenie bassoon player. This pissed off the weenie and they ended up having an intense street fight afterward. They ended up in court, and Bach was asked to go easy on the church choir. Bach, who is so fed up with the church choir's bad music, decided to finally enjoy some fine music. Luckily, Bach had a very strong pair of legs. He traveled 280 miles, which was almost half of Germany, yet again, all the way on foot, to Lübeck to listen to one of the greatest organists at the time, Dietrich Buxtehude. A few months later. It certainly was a tiring trip, but it's totally worth it. Bach not only had the chance to meet Buxtehude in person, learned quite a lot of new ideas from Buxtehude, and even asked to marry Buxtehude's daughter, although Bach refused. On his way back to Arnstadt, he also went to Hamburg to visit some of his old friends. It was a wonderful and fruitful trip. But wait, don't you have to work? Don't worry. I got permission from the church to leave for 1 month. But Mr. Bach, you have been gone for 4 months. Oh, crap.
See you in court, Mr. Bach.
And that's not all the trouble he made in Arnstadt. After the trip, Bach started to experiment some of the new musical ideas he brought from Lübeck, meaning he would put a lot of strange ornaments, key changes, and variations in his chorales, which got him a lot of complaints. It also didn't help that he was reported for sneaking a strange damsel, possibly his cousin Maria, into the church organ loft, entertaining her. After upsetting nearly everyone at the church, Bach thought he couldn't stay any longer, so he went to Mühlhausen to work as an organist. After the disastrous experience in Arnstadt, Bach surely had learned not to make any trouble. So, Mr. Bach, what do you think about our church organ? It sucks. Go fix it. Okay, here's your salary that is even higher than what you got in Arnstadt. Keep up the good work, Mr. Bach. See you later. Now Mühlhausen seemed like a good place for Bach to work and to marry his cousin, Maria Barbara Bach. Everything looks perfect until there was a conflict between Bach's Lutheran beliefs and his employer's Pietist beliefs. Bach thought it's time to work somewhere else. Thankfully, his former contacts in Weimar came in handy. The Duke of Weimar invited Bach to work as his court chamber musician, and in 1708, Bach went back to Weimar and began his second term in Weimar. The Duke of Weimar, William Ernest, was also a Lutheran and lover of music, so he worked well with Bach and offered him a very fine position, freedom of creation, and very fine salary. So, Mr. Bach, what do you think about our church organ? It sucks. Go fix it. Okay. Wow, this Bach dude sure does know lots about organ. And so, people from far and wide came to Bach to test their organs, and Bach had a very unique technique for it. Okay, Mr. Bach, this is my beloved, beautiful, and very precious pipe organ, so please be careful with it. Pipe organ goes bang! That's right, he would smash the organ as loud as he can, scaring the heck out of the owner of the organ. And then he would improvise some beautiful stuff to test whether the organ is good or not. With his remarkable skill and many masterpieces of organ, Bach became quite famous in Germany as an organ master. At one point he was almost headhunted by all the city of Halle, but the Duke of Weimar, determined to keep Bach, agreed to give Bach a raise, so Bach stayed in Weimar. But Bach's outstanding skill of organ would not be unchallenged. He was once involved in an organ contest with a guy named Louis Marchionne, one of the greatest organists in Europe, as well as an arrogant and short-tempered jerk. He was hired as a royal chapel organist, but his colleague really didn't like him, so he sent Bach to give Marchionne a lesson to see who's the true greatest organist in Europe. Bach accepted the challenge and came to the contest on time and well prepared, facing his feared opponent, nobody. Some say Mark Shung simply wanted to give up his position and went back to France, while many others believe that Mark Shung fled, knowing he was outmatched. But no matter what reason, it was no contest, literally. Mark Shung didn't show up and Bach won by doing absolutely nothing. So the contest had turned into Bach's recital with the royal family listening. It's almost a certainty that Bach is now the greatest keyboardist in Europe. Bach's second term in Weimar is widely considered the beginning of his prime. Now let's talk about his musical works during these time periods. His works approximately from early period to Weimar period include the Little Fugue in G minor. Passacaglia and Fugue in C minor. And the famous theme in horror films, Toccata and Fugue in D minor. This Toccata and Fugue, however, is considered an unusual piece for Bach to compose. So it is argued that either Bach wrote this piece while he was experimenting with new musical ideas, or Bach actually did not compose this piece at all. In Weimar period, Bach composed largely for organ, including most of the Little Organ Book. He also began to compose some preludes and fugues which would later become parts of the Well-Tempered Clavier, one of the most significant musical works of all time. By the way, if you don't know what a fugue is, please check out my video about the Baroque period. In 1717, Bach wanted to be the master of the chapel choir, but was refused by the Duke of Weimar. During this time, there was a conflict between the Duke and his nephew, so the nephew came to Bach and said,
Hey, you want to be the master of the chapel choir? I can make you one.
And under the help of the nephew, Bach was introduced to be the master of chapel choir in the course of Anhalt-Köthen. The Duke of Weimar, however, was not happy with this, so when Bach came to the Duke requesting his resign, the Duke refused and threw Bach in jail. So, would you like to rescue Bach from jail and listen to more of Bach's interesting stories? Then please subscribe and hit the like button, and then I'll be Bach.